Who or what exactly is the Antichrist, also known as the man of lawlessness or the beast? Where will he come from? What will he do? And why will he come exactly? Well, let's go to scripture. Let's read from Revelation 13 verse 15. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it caused all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. You know, there's so much confusion about this that I need to explain this in detail from a biblical perspective. And once you understand it, you won't be easily misled. So let's jump into this. First, you need to understand that there has been many antichrists. There are now, and there also will be. There's a difference between a antichrist or Christs and the Antichrist. 1 John 2 verse 18. Children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many antichrists have come. Therefore, we know that it is the last hour. So the first thing you need to realize is that a antichrist is exactly what it sounds like. It is a person or movement against Christ, antichrist, right? And the devil is behind it. The Bible also talks about the spirit of the Antichrist. 1 John 4 verse 1. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. Verse 3. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming and is in the world already. John also wrote about those who pretended to follow Christ, who were part of the light and knowledge, but they were not. So, you will also realize that a lot of antichrists will do what? Lie and deceive people. They will pretend to be good while they are actually evil. 1 John 2 verse 22. Who is the liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son. So, those who deny that Christ is God are antichrists, and also those who pretend to be Christ are antichrist, because they are against Jesus Christ. So there is a spirit of the Antichrist. And you need to understand that this is a spirit of rebellion, a rebellion against God and everything he stands for. And then we also know that there are a lot of false prophets. Matthew 24 verse 24. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Now, there's always been a spirit of the Antichrist working in humankind, in men and women of disobedience. But when we talk about the Antichrist, when he will come, he will pretend to be God himself. 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. So the first thing we learn is that Jesus will not come again until the tribulation and the Antichrist came. Verse 4. Who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. So the Antichrist will pretend to be God. He will do the same thing, and Satan will do it through him, but he'll do the same thing that Satan tried to do for thousands of years. Doing it through men who were in power, who thought that they are gods. It started, all of this, back at the start of humanity with Adam and Eve. Remember, Lucifer lied to Adam and Eve, and he told them this. In Genesis 3 verse 4, "You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Knowing good and evil. You see, he wanted them to understand how evil works and to become evil. So what happened? They ate. They wanted to believe that it is true. They wanted to be like God, and so they sinned. And the moment they disobeyed God, sin and the knowledge of evil came over them, and they died spiritually, and so did all humankind through them. The knowledge of sin entered the world. Humanity received a new sinful nature of which pride was at the center. And then we see how evil they became, right before the flood, Genesis 6. Satan, the fallen angels, influenced them. They also created the Nephilim, and it was just a big soup of evil. People rebelled against God, antichrists, and probably worshipped these fallen angels and Nephilim as gods, except Noah and his family. Then God washed all the evil away with the flood. And after the flood, people started to rebel again because they wanted to live in sin. Nimrod was the first mighty man after the flood, Noah's grandson. He built many cities, and he was basically the first world ruler. And it's interesting that even the Freemasons call him the first Grand Master after the flood. And this was also the time where people rebelled against God, started to worship demons as other gods, and how religion started. You can watch my videos about the time before the flood, the antediluvian period, and after the flood on DLM Men's Lifestyle, where I explain this in a lot more detail. The whole series is called 10 Life-Changing Truths Every Man Must Know. We can see how technologically advanced these people really were. It shocks modern archaeologists because they don't know how it's done. Then, after the flood, people started to rebel against God. They built the Tower of Babel as a symbol of rebellion. It happened the same way it happened before the flood. God had to stop it again, and he gave them different languages. So they spread all over the world. They carried what they knew with them, these people. So the same religion that they had, this fake religion, but now with different names for their gods. And these religions carried on over time with slight differences. Even in Deuteronomy 32 verse 17 we read, "They sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods they had never known, to new gods that had come recently, whom your fathers had never dreaded." Then after Nimrod, as we look at the history of mankind, there was always a ruler, a king, who thought because of his power, that he is like God. He can just snap his fingers and everybody moved. When he says something, it happens. But over the history, when we look at these type of people who are full of pride, "Oh, I'm a god now," they just puppets of the devil because he influenced them. Isaiah 14 verse 13, "You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most high. You see, I, full of pride. And that's exactly what is in the heart, the core of the sinful nature of humankind. I. Verse 15. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. The Tower of Babel is a very good example. Men who were influenced by evil, rebelled against God, worshipped demons as gods, and wanted to build a tower high enough to try and be gods themselves and replace God. This story repeats itself, generation after generation after generation. If you look at the history of humankind, it just repeats itself, because it is the spirit of the Antichrist in men of power who want to be like God. That pride, it comes from the devil, Lucifer. He carries forward the spirit of the Antichrist. Now, I want to focus in on some men in history who some people, even Christians, think they probably were this guy or that guy. He was probably the Antichrist. Micah 5 verse 2. But you, O Bethlehem Ephratah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old, from ancient days. Now, as you clearly see, this prophecy is about the Messiah, where the Messiah will come from. But then we read this in verse 5. And he shall be their peace, when the Assyrian comes into our land and treads in our palaces. Then we will raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 princes of men. They shall shepherd the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod at its entrances, and he shall deliver us from the Assyrian. So, many people think that the Assyrian is the Antichrist, but he's not, as I will explain in a minute. The prophecy about Assyria was fulfilled shortly after this by King Sennacherib between 700 and 800 BC. And he was the superpower of that time, in a sense. But he was not the Antichrist. Why not? Well, to identify the Antichrist, you always need to remember that there are 3 things, let's say criteria, needed for someone to be the Antichrist. Not just 1 or 2 of these things, all 3 of them needs to be true. And we read this not just from 1 book, but 3 books. We read this from Daniel, from Revelation, and 2 Thessalonians. And these things are, number 1, he will sit on the temple in Jerusalem and claim to be God. 2, the Antichrist will rule the world. 3, first, he will have peace for Israel. So Sennacherib, you can see, who was a world leader, but he didn't have peace for Israel, and he didn't sit in the temple. So he cannot be the Antichrist. So he's out. Other people say that Nero was the Antichrist. Nero was the 5th emperor of Rome, who ruled from AD 54 until AD 68. One of the reasons why people think that he is the Antichrist is because people who like to look at numbers, gematria, who like to assign certain numbers for certain words. So they found a system where it looks like Nero, when you look at his name, has the 3 numbers 666, which refers to the beast, to the man of lawlessness. So they assign a number for each letter to find a hidden meaning of some sort. And because Revelation 13 verse 18 says, this calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, I personally do not believe that Nero was the Antichrist. He was a Antichrist for sure, but not the Antichrist. Because we need to look at all the books together and not just focus on one. And I don't believe he was the Antichrist because, first of all, Nero was not defeated by the second coming of Christ, because it did not happen yet. And second, the defeat of the Antichrist is after the Great Tribulation, which also did not happen yet. And third, the book of Revelation was written by John when he was much older, at a time after Nero's reign. So it won't explain a prophecy that will still happen if it already did. Now, as I said, I do believe that the spirit of the Antichrist was also over Nero because he was extremely evil. He caused a lot of pain and suffering and killed many Christians. But I do not believe that he is the Antichrist. Now, some people also look at the king of Tyre and say that he's the Antichrist. Ezekiel 28 verse 1, "The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, say to the prince of Tyre, thus says the Lord God, because your heart is proud, and you have said, I am God." You see, here it is again, the spirit of the Antichrist. Pride, I am God. I sit in the seat of the gods, in the heart of the seas. Yet you are but a man and no God, though you make your heart like the heart of a god. You see, it's the same thing over and over when we look at history. The same spirit of the Antichrist in men who rule or want to be ruled. When we look at Nimrod, when we look at even the pharaohs, when we look at the king of Tyre, the Roman empires, Hitler, and even George Soros. And I'll talk about the Illuminati in just a bit. But as you continue to read this verse, you see that God will bring judgment on him. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, because you make your heart like the heart of a god, therefore, behold, I will bring foreigners upon you, the most ruthless of the nations, and they shall draw their swords against the beauty of your wisdom and defile your splendor. They shall thrust you down into the pit, and you shall die the death of the slain. In the heart of the seas, will you still say, I am a god? Just want to stop here. You know, this question, will you still then say that you are a god after you've died? When we look at the founders of other religions, all of them died, except Jesus Christ. And all the men who thought that they were so powerful because they ruled. They thought they were gods, but then they died just like normal men. Verse 10, for I have spoken, declares the Lord God. So you see, only God is God. He prophesied that Tyre will be destroyed, and it happened. First by Nebuchadnezzar, and then by Alexander the Great. You see, there are a lot of people with the spirit of the Antichrist in them. The devil influences them, but it doesn't mean that they are the Antichrist. For example, look at the evil army of Hamas, who torture their kids while they are young to become evil. They beat them into submission and to follow radical Islam doctrine. They brainwash them to become murderers and rapists whose consciences have been seared, all in the name of man-made religion. If you don't believe me, you can watch the testimony of the son of the man who co-founded Hamas and shares his first-hand experience.
Hamas' first crime against children in the Palestinian societies is not arming them or encouraging them to carry suicide bombing attacks. It's the religious, ideological indoctrination that I had to go through. Imagine a 10-year-old child. When I disobeyed Hamas, I was tied up to a post, and I was whipped by Hamas top leader, and I don't want to mention his name because he's not worthy, with the electric cable. Every lash, I lost my breath until I lost my consciousness. My father was in prison at that time, and this leader thought that he was my mentor. This is Hamas discipline. This is how they wanted me to be. To become a violent savage like them. If you follow the history of Hamas and their development or their evolution, whatever you want to call it, Hamas, what sabotaged the peace process through suicide bombing attacks. And they don't have a vision. That's the problem. Because nobody can satisfy their ambition when they are waging a holy war. We're not talking about IRA. We're not talking about other political terrorist organizations that we can pressure them, bend them, bring them to the negotiating table. We are talking about a religious group that does not believe in political borders, that wants to annihilate an entire race in order to build an Islamic state. I don't know what else can be said about this group. And I don't know why it's not obvious to everybody that the United Nations fail to condemn them. Bunch of rapists. This is what they are. Lower than animal consciousness. Hamas is committing a crime against this generation and the next generations to come.
Now, some people say that they believe that the Antichrist will be a Muslim. I don't believe so because, well, they are antichrists because they don't believe that Jesus Christ is God. They believe just he's a prophet, Isa. But I don't believe that the Antichrist will be a Muslim because, first of all, I don't think Jews will accept him as the Messiah because they want to kill Jews, right? And then also there are a lot of different groups of Muslims and they don't all get along. So it's going to be extremely hard to choose a world leader that's Muslim because not all of them will agree with it. And I also don't believe a lot of people will accept a Muslim as a world leader because a lot of people who don't follow Islam see it, especially when they look at extremists, that they bring forth hate and murder in the name of their God. So they don't see their God as a God of love, but just extreme. And so they don't agree with it. Their God is not holy and righteous because he's just treating everybody as animals. God is a personal God who is righteous, who is holy, but he is also love. And the thing that these extremists do is not in love. It is not holy, it is not righteous, but it is the spirit of the Antichrist. 1 John 4 verse 7, Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world, so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. Verse 12. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. Now, with that said, who is the Antichrist, and where will he come from? I personally believe he will come from Europe. Why? Because all the evidence leads there. There's a few interesting things I want to share with you that you need to know, facts. And I'm going to do that in part 2 of this series. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so you won't miss that video. And before you go, always remember, God loves you. And I love you too.